My child. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not meant to pass through your life like ordinary words. Do not rush away. Do not let your mind tell you that this is just another message appearing at a random hour. There is something hidden beneath the surface of this connection, something that has been growing quietly while you were trying to understand why your heart still feels pulled toward one particular person. And if you have been wondering why the energy around this relationship suddenly feels different, why thoughts of commitment seem stronger, why something inside you keeps whispering that a turning point may be closer than it appears, then listen carefully. The answer is not as simple as attraction, timing, loneliness, or desire. Something deeper has been unfolding, and the person connected to your heart may be considering a future with you far sooner than you realize. There are moments in a human life when love changes shape without announcing itself. One day it feels uncertain, fragile, complicated, almost impossible to define. Then something happens beneath the surface. A person who once questioned everything begins imagining permanence. Someone who once tried to remain emotionally guarded starts seeing your face inside ordinary future moments. They imagine waking up beside you. They imagine coming home to you. They imagine sharing decisions, meals, celebrations, quiet evenings, difficult seasons, laughter that nobody else understands. And what makes this moment so powerful is that your soulmate may not even fully understand when this shift began. It did not arrive like thunder. It arrived slowly, through absence, memory, realization, and one very important truth they could no longer avoid. They began noticing that the idea of losing you felt heavier than the fear of choosing you. That sentence carries more meaning than you may realize. Because for a long time, part of this person may have been afraid of the depth of what they felt. Perhaps they tried to reduce the connection to something easier to control. Perhaps they called it timing. Perhaps they told themselves they needed more certainty. Perhaps they distracted themselves with responsibilities, expectations, other voices, or questions about what the future should look like. They may have even believed that distance would make the feeling smaller. But instead, distance revealed the size of it. Silence revealed the importance of it. The possibility of life moving forward without you revealed something they had avoided admitting: you were not simply someone they cared about. You had become connected to the way they imagined home. And this is where the story begins to change. There was a recent moment, possibly one you know nothing about, when your soulmate found themselves thinking much further into the future than they normally allow themselves to go. It may have happened late at night when everything around them became quiet. It may have happened during a conversation about relationships, marriage, family, or the future. It may have happened while watching another couple share something simple but meaningful. Whatever triggered it, your name rose inside their heart in a way they could not ignore. They saw you differently in that moment. Not as a question. Not as a temporary chapter. Not as someone they could continue keeping at emotional distance forever. They saw you as someone they could choose. And once that thought entered their mind, another thought followed immediately behind it: what if I wait too long? That question disturbed them more than they expected. Because there are people who assume love will remain available simply because it has been patient before. They believe the person who understands them will always understand. They believe the person who waits will continue waiting. They tell themselves there will be another conversation, another month, another season, another opportunity to say what they could not say today. But something has begun changing inside your soulmate. They are starting to understand that love is precious precisely because it cannot be treated carelessly forever. Your life is moving. Your spirit is growing. Your heart is learning. And whether they have spoken these words aloud or not, they may sense that you are becoming someone who will no longer accept endless uncertainty. That realization has awakened urgency. Not panic. Not desperation. Something more mature. Clarity. There is a difference between someone rushing toward marriage because they fear being alone and someone suddenly realizing they have already found the person they would regret losing. What is unfolding here feels closer to the second. Your soulmate may have spent more time than you know observing the way you love. They remember the moments when you showed kindness even while hurting. They remember the way you listened. They remember the softness you offered when you had every reason to become cold. They remember something you said casually that stayed with them far longer than you expected. And there is one particular memory they return to more often than they would probably admit. It is not necessarily the most romantic memory. That is what makes it important. It may have been a moment when you were simply yourself. Perhaps you were laughing without trying to impress anyone. Perhaps you were encouraging them during a difficult moment. Perhaps you were tired, imperfect, vulnerable, or completely unaware they were watching you. Something about that moment created an image in their heart that has become difficult to erase. They saw peace. They saw familiarity. They saw a life that did not need to be constantly dramatic to feel meaningful. And lately, that memory has been returning. But there is another layer. Your soulmate may also be confronting something uncomfortable about themselves. They are beginning to see where fear has influenced their choices. They are remembering moments when they almost spoke honestly and then held back. They are recognizing the ways pride, confusion, outside opinions, or personal insecurity may have created unnecessary distance. This does not mean they suddenly understand everything perfectly. Human hearts rarely transform that neatly. But they are beginning to ask themselves harder questions. Why did I hesitate? What was I protecting myself from? Was I afraid of choosing the wrong person, or was I afraid of how much the right person could change my life? That last question has become especially difficult for them to ignore. Because real love asks for more than emotion. It asks for courage. It asks someone to step out of the comfortable space between almost and forever. It asks someone to stop analyzing love from a distance and begin participating in it fully. And your soulmate may be realizing that the relationship they secretly desire cannot be built while they remain half-present. Something within them wants to stop standing at the doorway. They want to enter. This is why thoughts of marriage may be appearing sooner than you think. But listen closely, because the reason may surprise you. It is not only because they are afraid of losing you. It is because they have begun seeing qualities in you that they once underestimated. They may have always known you were special, but knowing someone is special and understanding why they belong in your future are two different things. Recently, your soulmate has begun connecting pieces they previously kept separate. Your loyalty, your emotional depth, your ability to survive difficult things without losing all tenderness. The way you care deeply while still carrying private struggles nobody fully sees. The way you can be strong and soft at the same time. These qualities are beginning to form a picture in their mind. And the picture looks like partnership. You may think they are focused on your appearance, your chemistry, your history, or your emotional bond. Those things matter, but something more serious is happening. They are noticing how you would fit into the life they actually want to build. This is where heaven, within this story, seems to be revealing the hidden reason behind the sudden acceleration. Your soulmate has started imagining responsibility with you. That may not sound as dramatic as a secret confession, but it is far more meaningful. They are not only imagining romance. They are imagining showing up when life becomes difficult. They are imagining making decisions with your well-being in mind. They are imagining being accountable to someone other than themselves. They are imagining protecting the relationship, creating stability, and building something that can survive beyond temporary emotion. And for someone who may once have feared commitment, this is an enormous inner shift. There was likely a point when the idea of marriage represented pressure to them. Expectations. Loss of freedom. Responsibility. Risk. Maybe they watched relationships fail around them. Maybe they carried private fears from their past. Maybe they believed commitment meant losing part of themselves. But their understanding is changing. Because when they imagine commitment with you, it does not feel like disappearing. It feels like arriving. That feeling frightens them a little. Not because it feels wrong. Because it feels real. There is another detail you need to hear. Someone may have recently said something to your soulmate that affected them more deeply than they showed. It could have been a friend, a relative, someone older, or someone who simply noticed the way your soulmate speaks about you. The conversation may have seemed ordinary at first. Perhaps your name came up unexpectedly. Perhaps someone asked a simple question. What are you waiting for? Or maybe it was even subtler. If this person matters that much to you, why are you still acting uncertain? Your soulmate may have laughed it off. They may have changed the subject. They may have pretended it did not affect them. But later, when they were alone, the words returned. What am I waiting for? And they had no satisfying answer. That is when something became uncomfortable. Because it is easier to postpone a future when you can point to a clear obstacle. But what happens when the obstacle is no longer outside you? What happens when you realize the delay is coming from your own fear? This person has started seeing that possibility. And once someone sees their own fear clearly, they cannot pretend it is destiny anymore. That distinction matters. Because for a long time they may have confused hesitation with wisdom. They may have believed that because they felt afraid, they needed more time. Because they felt uncertain, they needed more proof. Because the connection was intense, they needed distance. But now they are beginning to understand that some of their uncertainty was not intuition warning them away. It was vulnerability. You mattered enough to frighten them. You mattered enough that the idea of being fully known felt dangerous. You mattered enough that choosing you meant they could no longer hide behind emotional independence. And now the same depth that once made them hesitate is becoming the reason they are considering commitment. There is almost an irony in it. The thing that slowed them down may now be the thing pulling them forward. But do not mistake this message as a command to chase them, convince them, or put your life on hold waiting for some grand gesture. The most powerful part of this story is that your role is not to force the outcome. Your role is to remain aligned with your own worth. Because your soulmate's awakening becomes meaningless if it requires you to abandon yourself in order to receive it. Heaven is not revealing this so you become restless. It is revealing this so you understand something about timing. Sometimes the delay you hated was allowing both hearts to mature enough to recognize what love was actually asking from them. You were learning boundaries. They were learning courage. You were learning that love should not require you to beg for clarity. They were learning that real connection cannot survive permanent avoidance. You were becoming more grounded in yourself. They were beginning to understand what your absence would actually mean. And now these lessons are approaching one another. That is why the energy feels different. Yet there is one more reason your soulmate may want marriage sooner than expected, and this is the part they may not know how to explain even to themselves. They have begun feeling time differently. Something about recent life events has made them aware that the future is not an endless abstract place. Days become months. Months become years. People change. Opportunities move. Hearts heal. Doors close quietly. And your soulmate may suddenly understand that waiting for the perfect moment is one of the easiest ways to lose something meaningful. There may have been a recent event around them that triggered this realization. Someone may have gotten married. Someone may have separated. Someone may have moved away. Someone may have expressed regret about a relationship they did not fight for. Your soulmate watched, listened, or learned something that made them reflect on their own life. And your face appeared in that reflection. They began asking themselves a question they had avoided. If nothing changed between us, would I be okay with that? The answer unsettled them. No. They would not. That realization has created movement in places where there used to be excuses. But the story goes deeper still. Your soulmate may have already imagined how they would tell you. They may have rehearsed conversations silently. They may have pictured sitting across from you and finally speaking without hiding behind humor, distance, or vague language. They may have imagined saying something much simpler than the dramatic confession you would expect. I don't want to keep doing life without knowing where this could go. Or perhaps, I think I've known for longer than I admitted. They may even have imagined your reaction. Would you believe them? Would you trust the change? Would you be afraid? Would you ask why now? That last question is the one they fear most. Why now? Because answering it requires honesty. They would have to admit that they almost allowed fear to cost them something beautiful. They would have to admit they noticed your value before they were brave enough to honor it. They would have to admit that part of them assumed there would always be more time. And somewhere inside them, they know you deserve more than a rushed confession without explanation. That is why they may still appear quieter than the energy suggests. Do not confuse internal movement with immediate external action. People can experience life-changing clarity and still need a moment to find the courage to speak. But here is what has changed: silence no longer feels comfortable to them. It feels expensive. Every day they do not speak now carries a question. What if someone else recognizes what I was too afraid to choose? That thought has crossed their mind. And although jealousy is not the foundation of true love, the possibility of you being deeply appreciated elsewhere has forced them to confront what they truly want. They do not want to watch your future from a distance. They want to belong inside it. There is something else unusual happening. Your soulmate may have begun paying attention to details connected to marriage that they previously ignored. Conversations about weddings that once bored them now make them think. They may notice rings, homes, family traditions, partnership, financial planning, future goals, even small domestic routines with new curiosity. Their mind is building an unfamiliar bridge between love and practical life. They are realizing forever is made from ordinary days. That realization is important because fantasy loves extraordinary moments, but commitment loves ordinary ones. And your soulmate may be discovering that when they picture the ordinary parts of life, you are still there. Not only dressed beautifully in some imagined ceremony. You are there on difficult mornings. You are there when plans change. You are there when one of you is tired. You are there when money needs to be discussed. You are there when family needs support. You are there during quiet Sundays, long drives, grocery runs, celebrations, illnesses, setbacks, laughter, silence, and years that do not always feel cinematic. And strangely, those ordinary images may be what convince them most. Because passion can make someone dream of a night. Peace can make someone dream of a lifetime. You represent more peace to this person than they may have understood before. Not because everything between you has always been peaceful. In fact, some of the strongest connections pass through confusion precisely because they awaken unhealed places. But underneath the emotional complexity, your soulmate senses something rare. With you, they feel seen. And being truly seen is terrifying until someone realizes how exhausting it is to be loved only superficially. Your soulmate may have spent years learning how to present the strongest version of themselves. Capable. Independent. Fine. In control. But you noticed what was behind that. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe you misunderstood each other many times. Still, there were moments when you saw through them. And instead of using their vulnerability against them, you cared. That memory has become sacred in their mind. They remember how it felt to be understood without having to explain everything. And now they are comparing that feeling to other connections in their life. Something is becoming obvious. Not everyone reaches them the way you do. Not everyone makes them want to become more honest. Not everyone makes them question the life they thought they wanted. Not everyone makes them imagine forever. That is why their thoughts are accelerating. But before you assume this means a proposal is about to arrive tomorrow, hear this clearly: the spiritual message within this story is not about predicting an exact event. It is about the emotional turning point happening beneath the visible surface. Something is moving from possibility toward intention. And intention changes everything. A person can love you and remain confused for years. But when love becomes intention, behavior eventually has to answer. Your soulmate is approaching that threshold. Sooner or later, they must decide whether their actions will match what their heart has begun admitting. And that decision may come faster than even they expected. There is a reason for that. A hidden conversation has begun inside them. One voice says, "Slow down. Protect yourself. Be certain." Another voice says, "You have been certain longer than you admit." One voice says, "What if it fails?" Another asks, "What if it succeeds, and you almost missed it because you were afraid?" One says, "There is still time." Another whispers, "You do not know that." This inner tension is building. And the second voice is becoming stronger. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that certainty does not always arrive before commitment. Sometimes commitment is the courageous decision to build certainty together. That understanding may completely change how they approach you. But there is one final piece I need to reveal before this part ends. Something happened recently that made your soulmate imagine your wedding day. Perhaps only for a second. Perhaps they would never admit it. But the image came. They saw you standing near them. They imagined your eyes. They imagined the strange stillness of realizing that after every misunderstanding, every delay, every moment of wondering whether this connection would ever become clear, you had finally reached a place where neither of you needed to question whether the other was staying. And what shocked them was not the beauty of the image. It was the emotion that followed. Relief. Deep, overwhelming relief. As if some part of them had been searching for home while pretending they preferred the road. They did not expect marriage to feel like relief. But with you, it did. And that realization opened a door they may not be able to close again. Because now they have seen a version of the future that feels more emotionally real than the future they imagined without you. That is why the timing may change. That is why conversations may change. That is why their energy toward you may become harder to hide. But there is something your soulmate still has not told you. Something connected to the exact moment they realized they could actually marry you. It was not during a romantic memory. It was not because someone pressured them. It was not because they suddenly became afraid of being alone. It happened when they learned something about you that changed the way they understood your entire connection. And once they learned it, they sat in silence for a long time. Because suddenly they understood why you had acted the way you did during one of the most confusing chapters between you. They realized they had been missing a piece of the story. A piece that made your love look very different. A piece that made them question one of the biggest assumptions they had ever made about you. And what they discovered may be the real reason the thought of marrying you no longer feels distant. Because after learning this, your soulmate reportedly asked themselves one question they cannot stop thinking about now. And the answer could change everything.